what's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to do something a little different. This is kind of just going to be almost a podcast like video, just kind of on my opinion of UniFi, where I think it's going, what I like and don't like that they've done over the past few years, and kind of just a history of myself with UniFi and why I think or don't think that they're a good choice for certain applications. So first off, I got into UniFi probably around, I'd say 2013, 2014. Basically at that point, it was only for the wireless access points because they are super stable. They had super good range, and really you didn't have to manage them at all, really. You just set them, you forget them, and they just worked better than pretty much any other wireless access point or wireless router at the time. And the UniFi controller, it was kind of a newer concept. I mean, it wasn't a new concept by any means, but the thought of controlling your network equipment from a single application, which really is just SDN nowadays, which seems like everything is going to. But back then, it was more of a modern way of controlling things, and it was pretty nice, especially the insight and everything that you could get into your different devices. And it was also nice that it was optional, and really you only had to configure it once, and that was it. But anyways, I say all of that because I was basically using them in a home situation, kind of to have the reliability and feature set of a more business oriented device at home. And it worked pretty stinking awesome because at the time you really either bought the off-the-shelf routers, which don't support anything advanced at all, and by advanced I mean like VLANs or multiple SSIDs or guest network isolation, stuff like that, which really isn't that advanced anymore, but it was hard to find at the time for less than $400 an access point, because the big players at that point was, I think, Aruba, Cisco. I forget who else was doing it, but their solutions were extremely expensive. They were extremely good, but they were stupid expensive. And you did not want that in your house. But nowadays you've got UniFi doing the same thing they've always done, but you've also got TP-Link coming in with Amada basically to compete with it. MikroTik is also around the same price point. Actually, I don't remember if they even have access points or not, but I know that they have the routers and switches that have basically the same feature set as the EdgeRouters. But anyways, my point being is back then there really wasn't any good options. UniFi was by far the best, and I think that's what boosted them into popularity with the enthusiasts. But nowadays, there's actually a lot more options than you might think for an affordable price. But I still think that the UniFi devices are pretty rock solid. However, they have had some controller updates. I want to say back in the version 6, there was a few network breaking bugs in some of their controller updates that I saw. I don't remember the specifics, but I do know that there was a couple updates that had some major issues, which kind of went against the whole UniFi being rock solid thing. And then there was also them kind of lagging behind Wi-Fi 6 and all of that, which I don't really follow the bleeding edge of technology, so I'm just now getting into Wi-Fi 6 stuff, but that's also a complaint that a lot of people had, was that they weren't keeping up with really the good technologies. Now, the second thing I got into UniFi for was, at the time, my job was basically an infrastructure engineer, technician. We liked to call ourselves engineers, even though that wasn't our actual title. But we were supporting massive Cisco networks. So we were working on Cisco 6500s, ASRs, ISRs. All of our switches were 3560, 3750. I believe starting to move into the 8500 series, whatever their first kind of Linux-based massive switch line was. But we were all used to working with, routers that could do VRFs, MPLS, policy-based routing, had a whole bunch of ACLs. We were able to run VRRP or HSRP, all of that. We were designing spanning tree networks, port channels, multi-chassis Ethernet, like all of these advanced enterprise things because we were working on an advanced enterprise network. And what caught my eye was UniFi's EdgeRouter because it was $50 and it supported a lot of those features. So it had its own command line, which was fairly similar to what we were already working on. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever because I could pay like 100 or $200 and have 3 or 4 of those things in my house and start playing with MPLS, playing with OSPF, playing with VRRP even, and load balancing. Like all of this stuff that was unheard of on consumer stuff at the time, or prohibitively expensive to get your hands on enterprise gear that supported those features. So that was, I think, the EdgeRouter's claim to fame. And I know that MikroTik also had a router around the same price point with around the same feature set, although I never got into that. At that time, it almost seemed like there was 2 camps. There was UniFi, Ubiquiti, and MikroTik, and everybody liked each one for their own reasons. But I fell into the UniFi camp because I had started with the UniFi access points and then found the EdgeRouter and was like, this is the greatest thing ever. But now, over time, it kind of seems like they not really forgot about the EdgeRouter line, but it hasn't got very much attention. So it's just kind of been there unchanged since 2013, 2014. So nowadays, while it's still one of the more feature-rich routers you can get, I think, the hardware has aged. And it is really no longer a great option for most people because at the time when I first started getting them, the fastest internet connection I had was like 100 megabits. Like that was awesome. If I had a connection that was 100 megabits, everybody else had like 50, 30. You could still buy 10 megabit packages. So the EdgeRouter was able to support all this, like with all features enabled, offloading disabled, QoS on. It could do everything. But nowadays, 100 megabits is almost like the small end. So like even here in this town that I live in, which is in the middle of nowhere, I think our packages are 50, 100, 300, and 500. And right now I have 500. And I know that most people, especially enthusiasts, pretty much get the fastest connection they can get. And a lot of people now have gigabit available. If you stick an EdgeRouter X on gigabit network and try to pull the full bandwidth, you're not going to. It's so old and it's so weak, it cannot put up with it. And I've done a few videos on the performance of an EdgeRouter in the past, and even my latest one where I tested the EdgeRouter 4, you can't use the advanced features on it and expect to pull more than 400 or 500 megabits. And with everything trying to go gigabit or beyond nowadays, that's pretty low. So it loses a lot of its appeal. However, it still has those advanced features under the hood, which I still think it's the best device for that. But I also think that UniFi is kind of getting away from that. And I say UniFi, I mean Ubiquiti, because technically UniFi is their UniFi line, and then you've got the wired line. But anyways, they're kind of getting away from that. So they came out with UNMS, or like Ubiquiti's network management system, which they recently rebranded to UISP. But basically that is its own hardware controller, which is very similar to the UniFi controller. So it kind of seems like the UniFi line had so much success and they really liked the fact that they had this SDN thing going for the UniFi line that they kind of wanted to bring it into the EdgeRouter or ISP realm of everything. And it's been pretty slow to take off, but I do actually really like UISP. However, recently, some of the newer devices that they've been coming out with, I think they're, it's like the ISP router or UNMS router or something. I think it can only be managed with UISP. And I don't like that direction because it seems like they're getting away from all of the like super enterprise grade features on the box and command line and all of that, and moving it more towards SDN where it'll be more like a UniFi device, which I don't really like because under the hood, UniFi devices support a lot of these advanced features. However, since they're controlled by the controller application, any kind of custom command line configurations that you do on a UniFi device is overwritten the very next time you hit save in the controller. So while the hardware and the underlying software support a lot of advanced features, the controller limits it because it's not an option in there. And if you can't configure it in the controller, then basically the device isn't meant to do it, which is not something that I like. I kind of equate it to like the new electric vehicles or electric motorcycles. If you've kind of heard about them locking down features in firmware, like you have to pay for a software upgrade to unlock something that the vehicle is already capable of. I don't like that. I don't like that the hardware or the switch or router I buy can do VRRP no problem, but the controller doesn't support it. Therefore, it is more trouble than it is worth for me to actually get that working. I would much rather it be a convoluted command line that has every feature open to me than a streamlined controller that doesn't. But again, that is just me, and I understand kind of why they're going in that direction because it is more convenient and quicker to get going. But to me, that it loses its initial appeal. Now, another thing kind of that I've noticed that they've been going for is more of the enterprise line, and I'm actually going to bring up their website here for this. So just going to their homepage, UniFi everything. They've got the OS consoles, UniFi Identity, which is new. I was actually just checking that out. Looks kind of cool, but it's completely not related to networking or networking hardware in any way. Well, I say in any way, it's all network connected, but it's not infrastructure equipment. We've got Wi-Fi, we've got switching, we've got cameras, which is the UniFi Protect, and we've got the phone system, door access, and accessories for all of that. But now if we go to, let's just say switching, they've got this cool, AR app, which looks pretty cool. I've never used it. But if we scroll down, they've got this comparison chart. And you got the Flex series, which is just basically desktop switches. Lite, which is almost the same. And you've got Standard, Pro, and Enterprise. And I think these are meant to target the business market, especially the Pro and Enterprise equipment. But I almost think they're a little confused and they're trying a little too hard to get into that market, because while their edge routers and their initial access points were more enterprise grade stuff that you could apply to home, they still weren't technically like full enterprise. So there's certain features that people look for on enterprise grade equipment that UniFi just doesn't have. And one of those is the limiting factors of the controller. So like really advanced and granular logging, you don't get that in the controller. Going into MAC address tables or fine tuning very specific port parameters, you don't get that in the controller. Some other basic enterprise features like dual power supplies, these don't have. Now, they do have a redundant power system, but that is a $400 completely separate device. And from my understanding, you have to have that and a special DC cable and a switch that supports that special DC cable to have redundant power. And redundant power is like a bare minimum enterprise grade feature. And going along with that is also modular power supplies, which if we go to accessories, they sell a modular power supply and they give two switch models that it's compatible with. However, I cannot find those switch models. I don't know if they're older or if they haven't come out yet or what, but these modular power supplies, I've yet to find a switch in the UniFi lineup that's actually modular. So this is kind of where I think there's a bit of an identity crisis. They're kind of moving their equipment away from the super complicated, granular enthusiast line and making it a lot easier for people to use in the home. But then it's almost like they've kind of caught wind that their stuff can be used like at the enterprise level for much cheaper. So now they're targeting that. However, their stuff isn't quite at that level, if you know what I mean. Oh, and while we're on the enterprise topic, the UniFi Security Gateway the Dream Machine is an awesome piece of equipment. Like it can do all kinds of crazy good stuff. However, again, it's limited by the controller and it even lacks a lot of the enterprise features. So let's take a look at one of those. So let's just bring up the Dream Machine Pro or SE. And if we take a look at the back picture, Again, no redundant power. You have your single AC power and this special adapter area for a special DC cable to connect to their RPS system. So sure, it's got redundant power, probably $600 later. And even then, if one of these fails, I don't know if the whole thing powers off or if it will keep going on the other power supply, but either way, you can't just hot swap that power. If your main AC plug dies on this thing, it's dead. You have to replace the whole unit or open it up and, do something completely unfeasible. It's all about redundancy. So the redundant power, which it already doesn't have, and also redundant connectivity, which is a pain to set up because of the controller. The controller has a limitation where you can only have one gateway device per site. So you can only have one Dream Machine configured. Now, if you've ever configured redundant routing or VRRP, HSRP, you know that there's two gateways. One of them's basically the master and the other one is the standby. You can't have that. Technically, the hardware is capable of it. You can configure it through a command line some way. I think it's with a JSON file or something. It supports it, but if you make another change on the controller, it overwrites it. And that is something that is critical in an enterprise environment. If you're going to be using this in any type of critical situation, you either want to be able to use something like VRRP or have an active standby relationship in your gateway, and at a minimum have redundant power. And in my opinion, it fails at all of these. It's great by itself. It is awesome price to performance ratio. But if you are seriously considering sticking this into a business critical situation, you might want to rethink it. So again, this is where there's kind of that identity crisis where they're almost trying. I know the Dream Machine's not targeted towards enterprise, but at the same time, it's almost like they're taking we have enterprise grade features and running with it and actually trying to target more enterprise applications while at the same time dumbing their product lines down to where it supports less and less enterprise features, which makes no sense to me. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the whole where UniFi came from, at least from my perspective, and where I think they're headed, which I'm not entirely excited about. But now let's also talk about the availability problem. Now I don't think it's as much of a problem anymore, but in the past couple of years, because of COVID and all that, they're getting your hands on one of these edge routers or something has been pretty hard. So if we go to the Wired products page of their website, you can see all of these newer ones. This is that UISP router I was talking about, which can only be managed with UISP, I think. And then you've got your other newer devices. But if you scroll down and you get into the actual edge router and edge switch section, they're all sold out. So you cannot buy an EdgeRouter 12, an EdgeRouter 4, an EdgeRouter X, an EdgeRouter X SFP, none of these straight from Ubiquiti. And you can see down here the good old, well, they call it UISP EdgeRouter X now for some reason, but they also raise the price to $60. But if we go over to Amazon and we search EdgeRouter X, look at this, $150, $100. Those don't even have prices on them, and those are different brands. So you can't get them straight from Ubiquiti for $60 anymore. I don't know where you can get them for $60 anymore. 150 is probably, well, 100 is probably the lowest that I've seen these in quite a while. They're at the height of COVID. I want to say they were trying to be sold for $250. And that completely defeats the purpose because, yeah, it has $250 worth of features on it. But the whole appeal of that router was that it cost $50, not $250. So that's already out now. And I don't know if they stopped making them or what went on, but like all of these that are my favorite devices down here are sold out and they're really expensive to get your hands on now. But if you want to buy something that's actually in stock, your choices are these new ones that I believe are more feature limited than the old ones. While they might have newer hardware and probably support higher speeds, I want to say that they're probably locked down a lot more than those old ones. So I go through all of this basically just to say that I'm not too excited on where UniFi is going. I'm not entirely sure if they'll continue to have these like awesome gym products like the EdgeRouter X or the regular UniFi access point. It seems like they're trying to go places they probably shouldn't with equipment that is, in my opinion, worse than older equipment that they've already made. And they're trying to move everything to SDN, it seems like. Even their new UISP stuff is probably just going to use UISP as the controller software instead of having configuration on the box. And all of this at the same time, there's other manufacturers who are, I want to say, kind of catching up. I've been messing with TP-Link devices here lately, and they are really close to UniFi in terms of both performance and features. And at the same time, actually being at the same price point, if not less. And they're not the only ones. I mean, Cisco's still a major player, but they have their lower line of stuff now, like their CBS switches, their small business switches. Yeah, they're just switches. They don't really have the gateway stuff. But for the price point, the Cisco price point is coming down, and you get the Cisco features with it. And the same's true for other brands, Aruba. I've been working with a lot more Aruba switches lately just because A, they're available, and B, their price to performance is pretty good. Now for the home Aruba, no, we're still kind of talking in the enterprise land right now, but I think we're going to start to see more and more different lines of devices come available from different manufacturers that can more directly compete with Ubiquiti's equipment. Also, I might as well throw in the fact that you can go on eBay or Amazon and buy used Cisco stuff, which is actually enterprise grade for a lot less than a brand new UniFi switch. So, like, if I had the option, I could go to eBay right now and get like a 3560 48 port PoE. Sure, it's probably 7 years old and it's probably $300 or $400, but I could get that or a $600 to $1,000 brand new UniFi switch that has probably half of the features and capability of that very old Cisco switch. So this has been kind of a different video, just me more or less talking about a certain topic and my thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments if you would like more of these. I will say it's a little easier to make these where I just sit down and just start talking about something, but there really isn't a whole lot of value in it. So just let me know if it's something you like, something you'd like to see more of or whatever. And as always, happy networking.